Good afternoon, and welcome to our Wednesday Lenten study series. I'm Pastor Russ Yoke, and thank you for being with us as we delve into a very important topic this year, a topic that I think of all years has taken center stage in the life of the church even more than it normally has, and that's saying something. The topic is worship. Now, a lot can be said about worship, and we're going to try to do that over the weeks of Lent. But I think one of the things that we have truly delved into this year in ways that I don't believe the mainstream church has addressed at all, and that is, how do we worship creatively and faithfully using technology? One of the things that I was most struck by at the beginning of the lockdown back last year, almost this time, was the fact that I went from seeing almost no worship happening, or at least worship services happening on the internet, via Facebook, via YouTube, via live stream, to an enormous burst, a supernova of worship services that suddenly were a part of the day-to-day life of social media. And in this, if we're being honest, we were behind the times. Almost any other industry that you can think of that engages in the same sort of activities that the church engages in, that is to say, gathering, educating, illuminating, and inspiring, which I think are probably four really good descriptions of what we do in worship. Any other industry that's involved in those four elements long ago rather thoroughly began investigating the usages of social media, of broadcast, of traditional broadcast, whereas in the Christian church, social media has been very heavily ignored. And even traditional broadcast has been almost exclusively the bailiwick of, to be perfectly honest, charlatans and fakes. But of course, necessity is the mother of invention, and so here we are 1 year later finding ourselves, I would say almost universally using social media to communicate with our congregations and broader. I've spoken to so many of my former parishioners in congregations that I no longer serve who say, oh yes, we watch your worship service now every single Sunday. And to know that, I personally am having that kind of connection to people via the internet is both gratifying and humbling and a little intimidating, to be perfectly honest. But it has also left the church, and by that I mean the church Catholic, the universal church, the Christian church as it meets around the planet. It's left the church asking, what does constitute, or perhaps doesn't constitute, worship? Questions that we've never really had to deal with before, like, how does one engage in giving communion to people remotely if they are on the internet? How do our Roman Catholic friends handle both confession and absolution from a priest over the internet? How does one sing a hymn communally with the congregation? How does one engage in singing in a choir over the internet? All of these things the church has struggled mightily with. I think one of the things that I have seen among my own colleagues that has been a major source of conflict is the question of remote communion. How does one offer communion to parishioners who are worshiping together online, but are not able to engage physically with each other? How do you offer them communion in a way that both respects the institution and the sacrament, while at the same time respects the needs of the individual in these extreme circumstances? Equally so, one of the things the church, I think, has found itself doing is as much asking the question, how do we creatively deal with crisis, as much as we are also asking the question of how will we then respond when we get to return to the all clear. What happens when society signals normal is safe again? What will we do? Will we simply go back to what we always did before? I think if we do, that's kind of a shame. Not because there was anything wrong necessarily with what we were doing before, but I do hope that this enforced period of, well, faith gathering fasting that we have been engaging in for a year, I hope it will have shaped and changed our perspective in a way that gives us a deeper appreciation, a deeper commitment, and perhaps inspires us to strive harder and to be more earnest in our worship efforts. I certainly know here at First Lutheran, our worship committee has been asking exactly these questions. How will we look when we return to normal? How will we honor and respect what makes us uniquely us in a way that celebrates our ability to go back to doing what it was that we wanted to do, and to do so with a greater appreciation and a deeper passion for that sort of thing. And so I really wanted to spend this next few weeks really investigating the question, what does it look like when God's people engage in what is unquestionably the most recognizable public act of faith that Christians engage in? And how are we called upon to refine that? I think there are three things that sort of guide this discussion, three awarenesses of worship's character that I think are essential. And these three things are: first is that worship is primarily an act of communication. It is an act of not only us communicating with God, but it is an act of God communicating with us. I think this has oftentimes been one of the critiques that traditional worship leaders have had with contemporary worship leaders, and that is that contemporary worship often looks less like a communication, less like a conversation, and more like a concert, a performance at which messages are perhaps being conveyed to the congregation as an audience, and not in a reciprocal fashion. Likewise, I think this is one of the critiques that contemporary worship leaders have of traditional worship, and that is that the communication has become stilted and formulaic and disconnected from the heart of the worshipers. And so I think on both sides of that divide, we certainly see that communication is truly at the heart of what we're doing when we're worshiping. And worshiping is something we do together. Second of all, I would say primarily worship is communal. If you look at the witness of Jesus Christ, here's a person who has a perfect relationship with God the Father. God the Son may speak to God the Father at any point that he chooses to do so, may worship on mountaintops and stream sides and forests and fields, and is in perfect communion with God the Father. And yet, what does he do every time he goes off to have one of these moments with the Father? He takes disciples with him. He chooses people that he trusts to come and pray with him, to come and worship with him. Why? Because even the Son of God recognized that worship is something we do together. If you read the Bible, especially in the book of Revelation, the discussion of heaven isn't each and every one of us in our own little castle off by ourselves having a perfect and wonderful relationship with God, all on our own, perhaps sitting on a cloud strumming a harp. No, the images of crowds of people gathered together around the throne of God, worshiping God together. Ultimately, I think if nothing else, 2020 and 2021 have taught us that there is enormous value in being together, because we've all missed it so deeply. Even our most introverted members of society have gotten to the point where they say, boy, I really wish I could be around someone. And I think the final piece is that worship exists to fulfill purposes. Nothing in a worship service is just there because it's there. Nothing is there because it's incidental or accidental. In the end, every element of a worship service, whether it's a high church mass or a low church, a contemporary worship service with strobe lights and smoke machines, we have to always be asking ourselves, what purpose does this serve, and why is it important in this community at this time and in this place? What in this context requires this worship element? Because everything means something, even when we don't think about it meaning something. In fact, when we don't think about it meaning something, when we do let it become just a rote element that's there, the purpose that it serves is actually to distract us from God. And so we either have to re-educate our minds to say, okay, why is this here? Why does this matter? Or we have to reevaluate how we do worship. And so over the next several weeks, I want to look very seriously at what makes us us. Why do we worship the way we do as Lutherans? Why do we worship the way we do at First Lutheran? How can we look at and evaluate these elements, better celebrate them, and perhaps think very seriously about what things do we need to add, or what things do we need to trim? And be honest about this process together. I'm going to hope that you all engage in the comment section below. I'm going to ask you each week to sort of answer a question down in the comment section. And the question I'd very much like to hear from each and every one of you is, in the simplest form you can put it, in just your gut reaction form, what do you say for yourself worship means to you? I don't need a treatise. I don't need a paper. I don't need a paragraph. Just give me a sentence or even a word. Your immediate, emotional, off the top of your head reaction. Well, thank you all for being with me this Wednesday. I hope to see you each Wednesday as we delve deeper and deeper into this topic. Next week, we will talk about the traditional form of worship. Where does it come from? How did we get it? And why do we use it? All right, God bless, and have a blessed Lent. Thank you all. Pastor Russ Yoke here. Thank you for spending some time with us today. If you'd like to subscribe, click on my face here on the upper right-hand corner. And if you'd like to see some more videos, click on the box here on the left-hand side. If you want to support the ministry we do here at First Lutheran, there are links in the comment section below. Thank you and God bless.